Welcome to Trailblazer's Impact Podcast with inspiring stories of women. I'm Nan McKay, and Dee Dee Strum, my co-host, and I interview ordinary women who have lived extraordinary lives. The women we interview share their inspirational secrets and provide hope and guidance to women of all ages in similar circumstances. Trailblazer's Impact chronicles struggles, successes, and the impact of lessons learned from seasoned professionals who have blazed a trail for others to follow. Trailblazers Impact Podcast is featured in the top 20 Trailblazers Trendsetters podcasts by FeedSpot and as one of the top 28 podcasts for women in their 20s by Pretty Progressive. Our website is trailblazersimpact.com, and you can contact us at hello@trailblazersimpact.com. Please follow us on our website and read our blogs while we share the stories. I would like to introduce you today to Jewel Burks Solomon. Jewel has had a very interesting background, which we're going to explore a lot of different things. She's going to educate us a little bit on investing, and we're going to talk about her former companies and her trip, her journey that she has had through her life. So let's start out by going back to the beginning, Jewel, and talk about how did your early life affect who you are today?
Yeah, so my early life, I think, really had a huge impact on my desire to become an entrepreneur because I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So my father, when I was a young girl, was running businesses that were started by my grandfather in Mobile, Alabama. And so every summer when I was spending time with my dad and the family there, I was working in those businesses. I can remember from a really early age, maybe 5 years old, I was the person running the cash register and loading up the refrigerators. They had convenience stores and laundromats. And so I remember being involved at a very early age. And I remember my grandfather counting the money. I remember going with him to the bank, and I remember the respect that he got, and everyone would stop what they were doing and say, "Hello, Mr. Burks." And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And I thought, when I grow up, I want to be in business because businessmen get respect, and I want to be in that. So that was my experience from my dad's side of the family. And then from my mom's side, I watched my mother start a business when I was about 8 years old. She became a State Farm insurance agent, and she built her agency from the ground up. And I remember seeing how difficult it was for her. And I remember the sacrifices that she had to make. And I remember wanting things and we not having enough money to get it because she was really pouring everything into starting up her business. And so from that perspective, I saw the grit and determination and the hard work that was going to be required if I ever wanted to start in business. And so from both sides of the family, I got these really intimate perspectives on what it's like to be in business and what do you have to give up to be in business. And I think that was really good grounding for me and ultimately what I would do and what I would become.
It's great to have those role models, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
And it sounds like they were role models for you. What's the first career choice that you made?
It's funny because I never really thought there was a choice. I always thought about business as the thing that I would do. I wanted to be an artist. So my love and passion when I was young and in high school was painting and drawing. And so I dreamed about becoming a famous painter and being able to spend my life traveling and painting. And I was lucky that my mom, she became a really successful insurance agent. And so every year we got to travel. So we went to Italy and we went to Spain, and I remember seeing painters on the streets, and I thought that was just like the coolest thing, and that's what I wanted to do. But I remember thinking about how do those people make money and are they able to grow sustainable lives and support their families? And so I thought maybe it would be more practical for me to go into business, and then maybe I could paint on the side as a hobby. And so that's ultimately what I decided to do. When I went to college, I majored in business, but I took a lot of classes in fine arts and had a painting minor. And so that was the balance for me of still being able to do something that I really enjoyed and loved, but have a pathway to potentially making money and being able to support my family. So that is, I guess, the choice that I made. But I've always been really thankful that I stayed in touch with that creative side and that desire to make things, because it's helped me throughout my journey.
So, what was the first actual job you held? Yeah, I don't think it was the painter in Paris.
No. So it's funny because the first business I had was selling paintings. So in high school, I had all these AP art classes, and I would show people my art that I was creating. And the first time someone offered me, $200 to buy this painting, I was like, whoa, $200, that's a lot for a high school student. So I ended up selling that work. And then I thought, maybe I should try this more often. And so I began selling these paintings, and that was kind of my little hustle when I was in high school. But the first actual job I had was I was in a program when I was in high school leading up to going into college called Inroads, which was designed to help minority students get job experience. And so I had an internship, and it was at a marketing company. And I actually decided to go and become a marketing major when I got to Howard University, which is where I went to school. But that early internship experience really prepared me for going into college, and then after my freshman year, going and interning on Wall Street. So I interned at Goldman Sachs as my first really kind of major internship, and that set me up for a really interesting path as far as my career is concerned.
So I think of somebody like that, a company like that, as being very financially based. Mm-hmm. And yet I don't hear that as something you were really interested in from the beginning.
What I was interested in was being at the best place that I could possibly be at the time. So when I entered college, we had a program at my school called the 21 Cap program. And there were 21 teams, and there was a corporate sponsor for each team. And my team was the Goldman Sachs team. And we were told at the beginning of the school year that the Goldman Sachs representatives would be observing the team throughout the year, and the student who was the strongest on the team would have the opportunity to interview for an internship. And this was not normal. Mostly their internship program was for sophomores and juniors students. And so it would be outside the norm to have a freshman internship there. But I was determined to be the top performing student and get the opportunity to interview for that internship. And so it was less about what the company did and more about the fact that I'm competitive and wanted to secure that internship. And also, I knew that that type of exposure and that type of opportunity to be in New York for the summer, to work at that time, one of the top firms, and still to this day, one of the top firms, would be something that was really special. And I credit that summer for really increasing my pace. So coming from Nashville, Tennessee, where I grew up, to going to New York, where everything was moving a lot faster, it really helped me to just get on a quicker pace, really understand the importance of attention to detail and managing up and networking and all of these concepts that prior to that time I didn't really know much about. And so even though I didn't necessarily want to go down the path of investment banking, I thought that this is the best place for me to be at this time, that I can really grow my skill set and start to build a network of people that can be supportive of me.
Now, I don't really want to go too far down this path yet, but I'm just burning question, and that is, so did that Goldman Sachs experience give you any feeling about the transitioning that you have finally made over into investing? Was it something back there that sparked something, or was it just no bridge at all? Because it was so much later.
It's something I hadn't thought about it until you just asked me that question, but I do think that it probably planted early seeds in my mind about investing, because I remember observing the women who were managing partners and managing directors at Goldman, and just looking at their lives and thinking, one day I want to be in a position where I can make investments and I can be the one who is deciding what happens with these businesses and making predictions and all of this. And so I do remember that. And now that you mention it, I think maybe that was an early spark for me. But what it really did was it just exposed me to, finance as an industry, and also business creation from that perspective. And so I do think that was an early spark in my curiosity around what does it mean to start businesses, grow businesses, get investment for these types of businesses. So yeah, I think that probably was something that put just a little seed in my mind.
Now, we will go there eventually because I think that's one of the most exciting things. But in between, let's talk about in between, because didn't you work at Google for a while?
I did. So an interesting thing is that I interned at Goldman Sachs the summer of 2008, which, if you remember, probably wasn't the best time to be getting into the finance industry. And so I was fortunate that when I got back to school and was thinking about what I would do for the next summer, although I had done a great job at Goldman and got an offer to return, I was curious about other opportunities because I thought maybe this isn't the best place to be starting a career at this time. So I was fortunate that Google was on campus recruiting, and I had a friend who'd interned at Google the previous summer, and he invited me to go to just a recruiting event that they were doing, a dinner actually that they were doing. And I struck up conversation with the recruiter, and she invited me to come and interview for the internship program, which is called the Bold Internship Program. And this is something interesting. My art comes into play in this story, is that the interviewer asked me, do I have any special talents or anything that I'm particularly passionate about? And at this time, I was really passionate about my art, so I used to carry around my art portfolio just in case anyone wanted to see it. And so I just, whipped out the portfolio and I showed her these paintings, and she loved it. She was really an art buff herself. And so the whole interview turned into conversations about my paintings and why did I decide to depict women and children in the ways that I decided and all of this. And I credit, and I got the internship. So I always credit my art for getting me a foot in the door into technology, because that's really what my whole interview ended up being about. And so I decided to take this leap and go out and intern at Google, which at that time I didn't have a lot of familiarity with the technology industry as a whole. And I really knew Google as just a search engine. I didn't really understand that there was a whole machine behind it, a whole huge corporation behind it. And so my eyes were completely wide open when I went out and moved to San Jose, but was working in Mountain View that summer. And I just fell in love. I thought it was the coolest place. I thought this industry is just amazing. There's so much happening here. And so I was really excited and decided that this is kind of the path that I wanted to take.
So you didn't retire there.
Right. But I did decide to graduate from school early so that I could return quickly to working at Google. So I ended up finishing school in 3 years, with that internship experience being the thing that said, okay, I've had enough school. I think I can finish it up quickly and get back out here and be a part of what's happening in the tech space, and particularly at Google at that time. So this is going into 2010 when I returned to Google for full time. Yeah.
And what did you do at Google?
So my first job was enterprise sales. So what happened was I was so excited about it that summer, about how Google worked. I thought, wow, you send emails and they just get there so quickly, and everything operationally just seems to work. And I was contrasting that with how things worked at my university, which everything seemed to move a little slower, and, you couldn't really count on the technology. And so I decided when I was in my internship, I decided that my school should be using Google products. And so I made up this huge proposal and reached out to the president and the provost and made this pitch that we should move all of our systems over to Google for EDU. And I actually had a little protest on campus about this because I was so passionate about it. And Google caught wind that I was really trying to sell the university on moving to Google. And so they originally offered me a role in Google for EDU, selling to schools, because they were like, you seem to be very passionate about this and you seem to be pretty good at it. Howard eventually did move over to Google products. And so that was my original offer. But then there was a need for me to be on the business side. So doing Google Enterprise, at the time it was called Google Enterprise, now it's Google Cloud. But I was selling Google Apps and other products to businesses. And I ended up doing the EDU stuff on the side. So I ultimately was able to move about 25 HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, to Google products as part of my, they call passion project, or 20% time at Google. And so that was kind of the thing that I was really excited about doing, because I thought, man, this stuff works so well and it's actually free for universities. So all the schools should be using it. But my full-time role was to be selling Google into small to mid-sized businesses.
So why did you not retire at Google? What happened?
Yeah, so what happened was life happened. So my grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my younger brother was sick right at the same time. And being in California, I felt like I was too far to be present and to be helpful for both of them. And I honestly was just really homesick. I felt like I'm a little bit lonely and isolated being so far from family, and family is really important to me. And so I decided that I needed to get back closer to home. And luckily I had interviewed with another company when I was preparing to graduate, and I still knew the recruiter there. This was a company totally different from Google. It was called McMaster-Carr. It's in the industrial parts space. So can't really think of a more different company. But I called that recruiter and I said, any chance I could still work there? And she's like, do you mean from the job offer that we gave you 2 years ago? And I said, yes. And she said, no, well, you'll have to come back to interview, but we'll love to have you come interview. And so I flew to Atlanta, interviewed. When I got back to the airport, they gave me a call and said, you got the job. So I was able to make a really quick transition from living in the Bay Area to living in Atlanta. I was able to be there for my grandmother and my younger brother when they were kind of going through their health challenges, and ultimately started working for a company that at the time I thought, man, I'm taking a step back in my career because it wasn't nearly as fun as Google. But it turned out to be one of the best decisions I could have ever made, because it gave me insight into a whole nother industry, which ultimately planted this idea in my head about building a company that helps people locate parts more easily. And that's what I ultimately built with Partpic.
That is amazing. So you're in this company, you're seeing a need, you're getting the idea. Now, how did you bring that idea to fruition?
Yeah, so I came up with an idea that is relatively simple concept, which is people are always looking for things, whether it's for a repair project or if it's on a more industrial level where a machine breaks down and they need to find a replacement part for it. But oftentimes they do not know what these parts are called. They're just widgets and they don't know what they're called. And so I would hear this recurring theme on calls. So I was managing in the call center. So I was the person who got the escalations when people got the wrong part. And so they would call back the next day and be really upset because their machine is down or, whatever. And so I kept on hearing this thing of, can I just send you a picture of the thing? I don't know what it's called. I don't know how to describe it. Can I send in a picture? And we did not have any way to accept an image and do anything meaningful with it. And so I said, why can't we just allow people to take a picture and use that as the way that they search? So that was the leading idea. I also had a personal situation happen where my grandfather, he's a farmer. We have a family farm in Repton, Alabama, and he his tractor broke down in the middle of his harvest. And so he needed to find a part for it. And he called me because I was working at a parts company. He thought I could help him with this, and I could not find that part. So I was experiencing it from a multitude of angles, one with the customers, and then personally with my grandfather. And so I just thought there has to be a better way. And so I started doing research on computer vision technology. I heard about it when I was at Google, but I didn't really understand how it worked. So I started to try to understand how it worked. I did research and I found out that Georgia Tech has one of the top programs in the country for this area of artificial intelligence. And so I started to hang out at Georgia Tech and try to find people who were interested in building solutions that might be in line with what I wanted to build. And that actually worked. So I was able to have conversations, talk to people, and really land on people who had the capabilities to help me build out this product. I also called one of my former coworkers at Google who had gone on to work at Shazam, which is music recognition, and from a product perspective was very similar to what I wanted to build for Partpic. And so I told him about the idea, ultimately was able to recruit him to become my co-founder in the business. And that's really kind of how we got things started.
Wow. And where did it kind of end up?
Yes. So we started in January of 2013, pursuing building out this technology. It really took us about 2 years to build these algorithms that could detect key differences between parts, small industrial parts. We were focused in the fastener space and then moved into electronic components. We did some plumbing parts, some automotive parts. But the key point was, how do we determine the differences between parts that otherwise look quite similar? And so it took us a while to build the technology and the database to be able to service large customers. Our business model was to license our technology to large Fortune 500 companies that were having a hard time with their customers finding the right parts the first time. And so our value proposition was that we can decrease the number of returns you have because we're going to be able to help you help your customers locate the right product the first time. And so that process of getting the product to a point where we could actually go to sell it into the enterprise, it took us about 2 years. In that time, we raised about $2 million in early stage capital, which was quite the journey in itself of being able to raise that money.
Let me interrupt you there
Yeah.
to ask you, how in the world do you raise capital at that point?
It's difficult, especially if you don't have much of a network of folks that can write those early checks. I was fortunate in that I had 2 family friends, and this was great. My mother, like I mentioned earlier, is an insurance agent. So she had one customer who has seen me grow up and believed that I was smart enough to build a company, probably didn't understand too much about exactly what I wanted to build, but had really just seen my journey and believed in me. And then we had a family friend, same story, where, they just believed in me. And there were the first 2 checks into the business that allowed me to get to a point where I had enough of a product that I could present on stage. So the first major stage that I got on was at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco. And this was September of 2014. And I was able to demo on stage. By that time, I had a test customer. And that's really kind of how I got in front of people. So I used pitch competitions as a way to get in front of people that I otherwise wouldn't have access to. And I was able to get the attention of Alexis Ohanian, who is the co-founder of Reddit. Now a lot of people know him because he's married to Serena Williams. But back at this time, he was doing a show called Small Empires on YouTube. And his team reached out and wanted to feature us as the premiere of his second season of that show. And at that time, I was so nervous. I didn't want anyone to know what we were doing. I was having a difficult time raising money, and it was just a really hard time. And so initially I said, no, I don't want to do it. And they convinced me to do it. And that actually changed things for us, because that put us, the show was really popular. And so a lot of people saw that. And we were able to leverage that to go and raise the rest of the money that we were looking to raise, and then build the team up, and then get to a point where we actually could service the customers that were interested in using our technology. So that takes me through 2014, 2015. We closed our seed round in middle of 2015, and then we're in a great position to go and sell into these large customers.
Okay, one question I've got to ask you. How much did the 2 first checks you got total?
They were $100,000, so 2 $50,000 checks. And really from 2013, when I came up with the idea, to 2015, that is what we had to work with. And also I put a lot of my personal savings into the business. And I got a loan as well for the first 2 years.
So you then became successful with the company, and what then happened?
So in 2016, middle of 2016, I was getting a little tired of being always on the road and not having enough time in the office and focus on our sales pipeline. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to make it so that our CTO, who is a brilliant Black woman, she has her PhD from Georgia Tech, I wanted her to be on more stages and to be really telling our story from the technical perspective, because to that point, we leaned heavily on my strengths, which were in sales and marketing, because that was my background. But I wanted to reposition Partpic as more of a leader on the technical side, because we were building groundbreaking technology. And so I wanted nationally to go out and do more speaking. So I researched some conferences, deep learning conferences that I thought would be a good fit. And I reached out to those organizers and I said, hey, looked at your website. It looks like you don't have much representation as far as women and people of color. So I have a suggestion for you for someone to invite. And I recommended Nashley, and they were like, you're totally right. She's amazing. We'd love to have her. So she went and presented at a deep learning conference in Boston in May of 2016. And she obviously did an amazing job in her presentation. And there were a lot of corporate development people in the room during her presentation. One of those happened to be Amazon. And so they went up to her, said they really enjoyed what she was working on, and gave her a card. And so she gets back to the office on Monday morning. She hands me a stack of cards, doesn't say anything, just hands me the stack. And so I'm flipping through the cards and I'm like, what did Amazon say? And that's really what started the conversations as far as acquisition. So we followed up. Initially, we thought it might be a customer relationship or a investment relationship, but ultimately it ended up being an acquisition. So we sold the company, closed the deal in October of 2016. And since then have integrated our technology into the Amazon mobile app to make it easier for people to find parts.
And now Amazon owns that company?
Yes. Now Amazon owns the company. The team joined Amazon and is now working on a variety of products related to visual recognition.
That is amazing. So did you then start thinking about what to do next?
Yes. Actually, in selling the business, it was a really hard decision. I would say Partpic was like my baby. I really loved the company. I loved what we were building. I thought it was such an important need that we were filling. So I really had a lot of difficulty after the sale. I was pretty much depressed about the kind of loss of my business. And so the thing that I started to do, which helped me out of that depression, was really pour into other founders. So I made myself available for breakfast with founders. I have a place that I love in Atlanta, which I'm actually also invested in, called The Gathering Spot. And it's a place for people to gather. And I do breakfast there with founders just about every day of the week. And that helped me to, one, just learn about what other people were working on, And also it helped me to start doing something that I made a pledge to myself that I wanted to do, which was become an investor. And so by meeting all of these companies, I began to see companies that I thought were really great. I was meeting companies, I was trying to advise them and become a mentor to them. And as I really learned more about the company and the founders, I became interested in actually making investments. And so that's kind of how I've transitioned over the last almost 3 years into an investor, which has been a really exciting journey for me.
And I'm trying to figure out, as an investor, do you set up some criteria that you look for in businesses? And are you working with different levels of businesses, those that are just starting up versus have been there for a while? Tell me about all that.
Yeah, so for the vast majority of the investments I've made so far, it's been very early stage. My criteria has been a lot around the founder themselves. So some of the people I've invested in, I've known for several years. Some of them actually, we were on the same kind of pitch circuits at these same events, and I got to know them that way. Some of them have just been through introductions, or they've been through some of the organizations that I'm involved with. So one that comes to mind is Goody Nation. So it's a nonprofit organization in Atlanta that's focused on using technology to solve social problems. So one of the companies I met through Goody Nation was Gooder, which we're here at a conference and they presented here today. Jasmine Crow is the founder of that company. And I was so impressed with Jasmine, seeing her. I actually was one of her coaches working on her pitch very early, super early in the company before she had any product. And I just fell in love with her and her story and her passion for solving this problem around hunger. And so that was one of the first investments that I made. And I was just so excited for the idea that there's still these huge problems, and there are ways that technology can solve these problems. And there are people who have a lot of passion for solving these problems, and I want to be involved in that. And so it's really about the founder. I care a lot about the problems they're trying to solve and making sure that they are meaty, big problems. And then I think about the team and the technology. And since I've built technology products, I'm really interested in how the thing works and the product itself. But those are kind of the leading things that I think about when I'm making an investment.
Well, the whole thing is very interesting. I think I didn't even know there were these like mini Shark Tanks that are all over the place.
Yeah.
It's just been fascinating. I would like to talk to you for a long, long time, but I have to close, and I want to ask you one final question.
Sure.
If there's a life lesson to pass along to younger people today, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing, and it might sound, a little bit cliche, but the biggest life lesson I would say based on my own journey is you have got to believe that you can. And I say that because when I was just starting, a lot of people along the whole journey, even from when I can remember even in middle school, high school, college, there have always been people to tell me that I couldn't do whatever the thing was that I was setting out to do. But I think credit goes to my parents. I never doubted that I could do things. I believed in myself from a really early age, and I think that's been a difference maker for me. And I think that there are a lot of children out in the world that don't have anyone that's telling them, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I think that's a shame, because you need that early enforcement that you can do whatever it is that you set out to do. But for me, just always going back to belief in myself, and when I wasn't able to figure out the strength, the belief in myself, knowing people that I could go and get a pep talk from, and having faith and having core values that I could always go back to, that's really been a huge part of my own life. And that's something that I would impart on any young person listening.
So for all the people out there who think they can't do it, Jules says they can, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to another story of the impact of Trailblazers. Visit our website at trailblazersimpact.com and connect with us at hello@trailblazersimpact.com. And remember, you must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be.